It's 5 p.m.
Hey, Jim.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Something odd
Can you
here.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I
Sorry,
can't hear you yet.
I just received this in the mail. It's just setting it up a little bit. Anyway, that's
A simple mistake.
yeah, that's
Let me give.
I was just
let me
going to say
give you-
it's the Quest Pro. So it's kind of interesting.
Have you been enjoying it or
it
disappointed
arrived.
by it?
It arrived 15 minutes ago.
Okay,
So
so you've not had a chance.
not had a chance, but it needs to do all kinds of updates and all that kind of stuff. So it's all good. So yeah, I'm going to turn off the fire behind me. So it's a big gas fire. I needed it for, well, I could say for a minute, but now it's boiling hot. So
Are you in London or Norway?
at London.
Let me tell you why I was interested in chatting. First, I'm very curious about where you are or hope to take author, because I think it's an interesting idea. And I want to encourage you to stay with it, because looking backwards, 28, 30 years ago, I dropped something I believed deeply in because of necessity to generate income. And I look back now 20 years ago, and I wish I had continued it. So you obviously relate to author in the way, and it's probably much more commercial viability than the automated spreadsheets I developed with color graphics 30 years ago.
Wow.
So that's one interest. The second is really to talk to you about your work with Doug Engelbart, or how much or what you did, because I think I use the word pregnant somewhat often relative to some people and ideas. And the idea of collective intelligence fascinates me. But I think dynamic knowledge repositories fascinate me even more, because potentially they're a way of implementing collective intelligence. The publisher O'Reilly in Marin County uses the term harness collective intelligence, or he's credited with that phrase and is very conscious of it. But I think his intention of harnessing collective intelligence is primarily via software. How AI software, for example, could harness collective intelligence. I'm interested in a much broader definition, how we might create dynamic knowledge repositories for major societal problems. As it is, there's no go-to information or knowledge source, so that when we talk about addressing problems, we have to start from scratch again and again and again. So we really need some kind of DKR or equivalent. The third thing occurs to me is how you see the future of text and virtual reality relative to video and the future of video. I mean, for example, you've gotten very good at using video via Zoom and recording it relative to the Monday, Friday groups, relative to the symposiums, and even relative to Edgar, whom I've seen on my laptop or my YouTube screen on numerous occasions, because I have attended some of the meetings and therefore YouTube knows that. Anyway, so that's really three things. There are probably other things you might like to talk about, but I'm just curious about those three especially.
Let's start at let's go back reverse order, if you don't mind.
Fine.
So with video, I'm basically born an artist. I'm not an engineer or anything like that. I went to art school and all of that. So that's where I live. You know, my camera is super important to me and that kind of stuff. I get very, very upset if video looks a bit odd. My best friend who died a few years ago, he was a photographer. My other best friend who died this year, he was also a photographer. You know, we were the kind of people who, when we watch a movie, we will stop and look at the grain. You know, it's like, oh my God, the shadow detail, you know, that kind of stuff. It's obsessive. You know, some people do it with fonts, some people do lots of things, and it's fine. But to me, that's really, really personal because my art background, I think if you have any kind of artistic, creative, whatever, you can make anything look beautiful or interesting. And sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's a bit of a waste of time, but to me,
Agreed.
that comes on the personal side. You know, we need authors and artists and painters and poets to bring the world forward. But the work that I'm trying to do is more providing tools for making other people to make their own sense of the world and their own art. So that's, but one thing I've noticed, quite a few people in my line of passion end up being photographers, like some of the people who did HyperCard and all kinds of things. Suddenly they're photographers. It's really weird. Bill Atkinson and all these guys. So I guess there is an obsession with the eye. I like to think that like in a computer, you use the graphics processor to augment the CPU. We do the same. We use the back of our brain, the occipital lobe, a huge amount of, you know, for thinking in many ways. But when it comes to VR and text, so I've only had this on maybe 5 minutes, and already I can see a couple of things for the future. First of all, it's a lot easier to take on and off. It doesn't rest on my nose, so wearing glasses just like you don't notice. It's literally floating on the forehead and the back of the head. So that's really, really good. It's not a process to go and you don't get like the Alien movie, that kind of sucker thing stuck to your face anymore. It's open on the side, so it's more AR rather than VR, although it ships with these little plastic magnetic things I can put on either side if I want them. So that's half of the equation with this new headset. The other half is you can choose how far away to have the lenses. Some people with glasses want more space or whatever. I pulled them back as far as I could, still didn't touch my eyes. And the field of view was this big. It was absolutely fantastic. The visual quality, believe it or not, I think is actually slightly worse than the Quest 2 in the center. But I think that's because this is so much clearer that I noticed the little black lines more. But either way, it's irrelevant. I do think that this will be a comfortable place to write, maybe even read.
Really comfortable place to write.
Yes. I've been playing with my Quest 2 in Author because what I've done is, and this was a really interesting experiment, there's a few packages, software packages that allow you to take the screen from your computer into VR. So some people, like a programmer, they would have huge monitors and all of that. That's fine. Authoring is, of course, different. So what I did in Author, I made the font really tiny, and then I squashed it into a thin column. And then in the VR headset, I made the monitor really big so that I still had a comfortable writing area, but it was quite tall, so I could really see a whole section at once. It was really, really useful because the way it's rendered isn't necessarily the pixels of my laptop. It is the screen rendering onto this. So that font, even though it was very small, didn't become pixelated when I made the screen really big. So that was an interesting observation. So the future of author, to skip onto that, and reader, I'm now really struggling with the team to get them to be focused, and they're not focused at all. And I just have to accept that, and that's okay. So I'm going to now invest a tiny amount of money on having a reader for XR. I'm going to start calling it XR because a lot of this, when developing for VR, what I found is you start with an infinite size playground, and that's overwhelming. So just to make a building to work in, and I decided to make the office in VR the same size as this, 4 by 6 meters roughly. The authoring tools aren't really Photoshop level, they're semi-coder level still. So it's uncomfortable. And so I would tend to leave the wall behind open, just so when I'm in design mode, I could get into the room, and it's okay. But then what became really interesting with that page that I did with all the different tests is it's easy to think that in VR, we can put things everywhere. Of course we can. It becomes messy, right? It has to be human scale, first of all. So the discovery process I'm going through now is, what size do you really want when you're writing? What size do you want when you're reading? And then differently, what size do you want when you are examining a document, which is yet another thing, like table of contents type thing. And then when you're examining an object, like Bob's murals, they're easy in this context because they should be big and you should be instantly be able to move them around. So that was a really, really good thing to find out. But a lot of other stuff, like having these maps, you know, with or graphs or whatever, even if they're huge and they're all over the place, it just doesn't become visually useful. You know, there are things that are useful like that, but to make it, you know, modeling a student sitting writing for a teacher, which is all my modeling, it's always a student-teacher relationship, because I believe when you are writing, even as a professional, you should write like you're trying to impress a teacher. And when you are reading, you should be critical like a teacher. So that's why I think the modeling works. So when you're trying to do that, yes, of course, there will be amazing things down the line in VR where you will maybe have library books representing your citations. Maybe there will be people representing the people. All of this will happen, but it'll be really, really hard to do right. But what I have decided is, you know, when you look at anytime you get more freedom of movement, like even a pivot, a mechanical pivot, it can go in a good place and a bad place, obviously. So the same thing with technology. So I think it is our job. We can't constrain it. We don't have the power to do that. But what we can do is hopefully give it more freedom of movement in ways that are good, that we believe is good.
Yeah, positive ways.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, looking at Edgar's future, I mean, Edgar today, this is to me astounding. He's 5.5 almost. This morning, he picked up his mom's iPhone, took a picture of himself and sent it to me. Not just the picture, but he actually wrote a sentence all by himself. We didn't touch the phone. I'll show it to you. I'm so damn proud. It's here. Oh no, sorry. Just he wrote, "Dad, you are the best." Right?
Yep. I identify with him because of our 7-year-old granddaughter, Sydney, who lives with us. And it's a pleasure in the same way.
It's astounding what they're being taught. I mean, he's being taught coding in school, for crying out loud. I met his programming teacher yesterday.
Really?
Yeah. It's mostly drag and drop variables and stuff, but still, you know, they're learning how to make things happen.
Yeah. Well, and just the fact that he exists and he sees himself on the video on YouTube, those you've taken of him, that's mind expanding for him.
Yeah.
That's part of his life growing up.
Yeah, it's so many things there. So, you know, with his life going forward, there will be more freedoms of movement. And as a parent, my job is to make sure they're towards what I consider a positive direction. Obviously, that's what parenting is. And as technologists who have a bit of a, in our group, we're not just trying to build the fastest or smartest or whatever, we're trying to do something good. That's our attempt. We have to try to do the same for society. It is very pretentious, absolutely. And, I remember Doug for many years, towards the end of his life, he admitted that, he tried to make that kind of a message, but he was afraid where people would say, well, who are you to say this? And I was like, Doug, the answer to that is really simple. Number one, you're someone who's really changed people's lives. And secondly, who cares? You're someone trying to do the right thing. Why should you need to justify who you are? So I'm trying to take that advice back into what I'm trying to do in a much, much smaller way. But if Doug had that issue, how can the rest of us not, But to go to your first point, the future of author and reader, there are some things in author that I want to fix. I want to make the map view more useful. There are all kinds of bugs that only I see. Most users will never see them, but they really bother me, as we all, with whatever thing we make. So that's happening. But in addition to the visual meta, really trying to sell that as an obvious way to store data, which can be anything almost. The next step for me really is to take author and reader into VR. I decided that today. And, I will then be competing with a lot of big companies, but so what? That's what I'm already doing. And in the beginning, their offerings are going to be quite safe, I think. So, if we in this community together try to figure out what is actually useful, because the writing part is solved. You just need a quiet space and a monitor. That's easy, but then the editing and making sense of chunks of stuff, that's really, really hard. And that's where the VR stuff, and this headset impressed me so much by the field of view. I didn't feel like I was in this and I had to do this. It's just here. Oh, okay, fine. What do I need?
So it's what we feel when we're just in our daily lives, a broad field of view and many degrees of freedom.
Yeah, and it has pass through. I haven't turned that on yet, but it's color pass through. So I should ideally be able to see you straight through. In fact, I made this sticker that I'm going to have on it, maybe. I may put that, it's probably too big, actually. I haven't even checked, but yeah, I'll have to cut it down a bit. But just if I ever sit in a public place, which I'm sure people will do more over time. Yeah, so the last few days have been extremely stressful for me. I went to physio today who managed to unwind me a little bit, but anytime there's an opportunity to do some kind of inventing, it's very stressful because you don't know, first of all, if you can do it. You don't know if it'll be useful, all of those doubts. But it is quite clear that, VR is happening. In a few years, that headset, more powerful than that, will cost 1/10 of the price. You'll put it in your pocket. And when you need space to breathe, you'll put it on, you'll really work everywhere. And then when you're done, you work on something else. I think we have potential. I just don't know what it is yet.
I assume that one of the effects of VR will be that it'll help people focus more instantaneously and focus deeply, because it does shut out the real world, but it retains the openness that we're used to. So it's in that sense, it's the best of both worlds. I'm sure there are some negative sides to it. But,
I agree with you very, very strongly. Although right now it's, Tim Cook has gone on and on about AR rather than VR. And I do feel that as I've been building these little test rooms for our book, there isn't that much of the space that I need. I need a human scale object. When you read a book, okay, when you read a newspaper, it's already too big, right? You need a table, you're going to fold it, it's too big. A nice book is human scale. It's what you can hold it, your eye moves along, you have the pages. That is where we need to start. Just because, with a Macintosh, originally, what do people do? Horrible font choices and bad layouts. Of course, it's trying out the space. it's very natural, but what it became useful for was to support, again, human scale knowledge pieces. And that's what we're going to do now. So that's why I'm trying to just have a book that you can read at whatever is. So the interactions that I've defined, that I'm trying to do is you go into the space and you have the book. You see it as a 2-page spread floating in the air. If you hold it on the side, you move it where you want. If you hold it by the side, by the corners, you scale it. If you hold it by the top or the bottom, just like a laptop lid, you rotate it. So you can even lie back and, read it in the sky if you want, or put it down on the table. But it's just a few basic interactions. So once we have that, the next thing is just using your palm to do next page. And finally, palm up, that goes to the next section. So let's say in our book, we have many sections that are a lot of text because it's a transcript. If you do that, it jumps to the next level 1 heading, right? So just yeah, thanks. So really, really basic things. But then what gets exciting is, you're living with this human scale thing, come across, let's say even a photograph, you pinch it, and then you get some options maybe, or you pinch it out and you let go. And now that's the entire wall in front of you, right? Because a picture you want to sometimes experience massive. So then maybe the book itself disappears or whatever. I actually don't know how to get out of this mode. But the idea is most of the time you're dealing with this space, it's comfortable. There's a reason people like 13-inch laptops. It's not just the price, it's also the size, not just in your bag, but also when you're working, it's focused. So to go in and out of those things. But there are many things in the group we talk about that is frankly rubbish. And it should be, like the timeline. We're going to build a timeline, but how often do you need to consult the timeline? Right? That's like you go into a specific thing. So there will be labs like that where, there's the molecule room, or all these things will happen. There will be dinosaurs and all these fantastic things will happen. But when it comes to the basic reading and writing, there's still a lot we can learn from how we're trying to do it in 2D.
I guess in what I hope to see happen in the future, timelines will become more important if you're talking about a societal problem. Name any one of 10 or 20. And part of the understanding of that problem is what's happened over time, both on the problem side and on the solution side, and even on the personnel side. Who's who? Who are the experts today, and who is becoming an expert over time because they've been an apprentice in effect?
Yes, and this goes back to metadata, of course. And I think that it doesn't matter what metadata styles become used more. They just have to. But I really think that the visual meta approach is so important because it's completely robust, of course, but also anybody can see it. It's not hidden. So that means that to make systems that take advantage of this, you don't have to learn some API or go into some weirdness. You just open up a document as a coder and say, this is the format, fine, pling, pling, pling. And as you talked about your spreadsheets, you can make spreadsheet things with this that can extract data. So what you're talking about with, who people are over time, things like this can be made available. And, there are many ways to do that. But what really upsets me, you and me are both mature. We're not, we're not in our 20s. So we have seen so many things from the 90s that were amazing, but they're all gone. It's all dead. CD-ROMs don't exist anymore. Flash doesn't exist anymore. The early websites don't really render anymore. Things rot and go away. So it bothers me, a lot of these flashy demos that are flashy for the moment. So when you're talking about societal problems, yeah, we do need better ways to address them. And that's why I'm doing the future of text, because I'm hoping somebody will come up with this idea or that idea. And that's why it's a very strange period right now up till December 9th, where I just want to talk about one thing, the book in VR. Let's just get it there. If it's awful, we have learned, and then we move on to the next thing. But anyway. I
We'll
wish you
keep
were
at
here
it.
I was just going to say, I wish you were here for the physical day for the Future of Text. Hopefully next year we can meet together.
And you're going to be in Norway next year?
That's what we're talking about, but nothing has been settled yet.
Okay. I would, I would individually very much like to be there. Part of my travel problem is that my wife has a suppressed immune system because her immune system had been attacking her liver. So she is very reluctant to travel anywhere, even out to dinner. Now that may change over time, and she and I were talking about it this morning as we walked. But I'm a little conscious of both wanting to travel myself alone and not wanting to do it too much relative to her inability to travel. So it's kind of a politically, internally familial political issue.
Yeah, I absolutely can understand that. Yeah, that's not easy. Where do you live, by the way?
I'm in Menlo Park,
Oh my God.
about 1 mile from Doug Engel's old home, which I walk by weekly.
I'm just trying to visualize exactly where that might be. So is that towards University Ave or the other way? No, that's the other way. University, that's Palo. Okay, Menlo Park is the other direction. Yeah.
Yes, you probably know where Menlo Atherton High School is. But near the, and you remember probably the brick walls along Middlefield Avenue in the neighborhood called Lindenwood, where Doug used to live. Yes.
Okay. That's nice.
So we are directly south of that neighborhood.
Okay.
Near the high school, in a neighborhood called Menlo Oaks. You probably drove down Willow Road on numerous occasions.
Yes.
As you got off Highway 101.
Yes.
Well, I think the second or third light off of 101 as you go toward Stanford is Coleman Avenue, and we're at the end. We're at the end of Coleman Avenue, very near Menlo Atherton High School.
It's a really nice neighborhood, lots of trees and yeah.
Exactly. We're lucky, and we've been here for 42 years. So as I've said to several friends, because we don't have any pension fund, that the appreciation of value in Silicon Valley has basically saved our financial ass. So that gives us some freedom and flexibility because of the Silicon Valley millionaires, which have been coming off, the stock market. And how long that goes on. Maybe someday we'll go the way of Detroit. But Detroit doesn't have the weather like Northern California does. So it's another question. And Bob Horn is only 30 miles north in San Francisco. So I get together with him, and he just moved to a high rise from where he'd been living for 20 years. So now he's more central to the city.
Yeah, it's a nice city.
Yeah.
There's so much
Although the homeless impact on the city has been disastrous. I was in Chicago several months ago, and Chicago has a reputation for being, infinitely clean because of the politicians focusing on it. And San Francisco has become the opposite, I'm embarrassed to say, especially when it's a tourist city.
In my mind, the Tenderloin in a lot of places has always been pretty rough.
Yep.
But it is a bigger problem, and it's easy to sit here in Europe, but our British government is not exactly taking care of people either. So I shall refrain from commenting. Although I have to say, I've never felt aggression in the city. I mean, I remember even once sitting at a Starbucks late at night, and a gang of teenagers came in, And somebody came up, one of them came up to me and said, "That's a nice laptop." And I said, "Thanks." And he said, "Yeah, because it's mine." You know, like you wanted to take it. I said, "No, it isn't." And then he just burst out laughing. Right? There is something special. I don't know. It's a magical place in many ways. But yes,
Yeah.
a lot of sad stories for sure.
Give me a sense of when were you here and what was your role when here?
I was there in the late 90s. I was studying advertising in New York, in Syracuse, upstate. I read an article in Wired magazine on CKS, and I didn't agree with much of the article, but the picture of the founders, the three people, they were on a Mac in Newton and a laptop, desktop laptop, and yeah. So I said, "Oh, this is my kind of company." So I emailed them, flew over for an interview, you know, an advertising firm, CKS. They were doing a lot of the design and advertising for Apple. Had a meeting went quite well, and he said, "Call me in a month." So naively, I thought that meant he would hire me in a month. So I got my car shipped across country. I moved, and I called him in a month, and I said, "I am in the foyer. It's a month." And he said, "Oh shit, okay, go talk to this other guy." So I was there. I had a year where I was there because of the immigration and all of that stuff. So it was fun. But I did realize I didn't want to do so much advertising as I wanted to do. Hang on, that's my wife texting. As I wanted to do making stuff. Hang on, Emily needs to be picked up. And are we okay if we wrap up today in 15?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, there's a transportation issue, which is really annoying. Okay.
If you want to wrap up right now, we can. I assume sometime in the future we'll talk again.
Yeah, I'd love to talk again, but no, I appreciate the conversation. You're helping me think. But yeah, so what I did there, I basically started advertising design near all the greats and all that stuff. It was, I remember Emilio was one of the CEOs of Apple, you know, all of those people. You know, it was a blustery time, but also I had, when I was studying in advertising in Syracuse, I was a big Mac head. And I remember driving from the local mall home one day, you know, hang on a second, both the Mac and Windows are awful. So, you know, in terms of potential, so that was a big shock. So that made me first spend 6 months to try to define information, because that's the stuff. So I did that, and then I came up with a philosophy of liquid information, just meaning it should flow smoother. And having done that, my own personal invention, which is what I always tell my students when I teach, is, oh, for God's sakes, stop texting. She's texting. So Edgar went to the science camp, and his girlfriend wanted, all this week, they're going to her house to play. The mom picks them up, and Emily's now texting how they weren't pleased to see her, and oh, for God's sake. Anyway, so yeah, so what I did and what I tell my students is, don't do any research, invent, then do the research. Because otherwise you're just copying. But you should do the research to inspire. If you can go further, of course you should, right? So that's what happened. And the first research I did was Howard Rheingold's Tools for Thought. That's where I came across Doug and Ted. Driving after working there, when I was there on some trip, I decided, you know, driving in these beautiful countryside, what's the point in terms of these people if you don't know them? So I just called Doug's office. Mary Coppernall answered the phone and said, no, why don't you talk to Doug? And I said, is that actually possible? So it was a very lovely chat. Office, you know, sitting there with him, it was not believable at all. And my physiology changed. There was a strong sense of electricity in my bones. It was very, very odd. So that was lovely. So over the years, we didn't do much real projects together. I tried to prod him in certain ways as an inspired fan to say, don't just try to build your OHS, you know, try to get funding to find out what it should be. You need to hire psychologists and all kinds of people, you know, and be the big boss of it. But Doug basically, in my mind, lovingly, wanted to recreate and create his original ideas. But his original ideas worked when he owned everything, because nothing existed before he did it.
Yeah.
But to live in a world of the web and apps and stuff, you cannot own everything. And that became an issue, but all very good. So when I did my PhD here, and I realized this basic thing of BibTeX, I think LaTeX is absolutely crazy, by the way. It should be used by typesetter. It shouldn't have to be used when you're doing writing. It's crazy. But to realize a document could be parsed. So basically the whole visual meta thing to me, it boggles my brain because it's so simple. I don't think I've invented something amazing. What I think I have seen is that very often if you have a company, you have layers of responsibility that have to add complexity to justify jobs along the way, right? So you have all these committees doing all these metadata stuff. And I'm just saying, I literally feel like a child just screaming, can't you just write what the document is? Right, and to me, that is the OHS, that is the X file. Because yes, it is more clunky than a JSON nicely formatted database, of course it is. But if you want to, stick the JSON in there too. It's so weird. Brandel and Fabian, these are insanely intelligent people, and also Björn Borud, whom you met a few times. But sometimes I honestly feel that's a detriment because they're so far ahead and they're so fast that they see all kinds of solutions to small things that shouldn't have to be solutions. It's like, anyway, so that's just a huge thing right there. Pause for coffee.
I was assuming that was red wine since it's 6 o'clock where you are.
I don't drink much red wine, but I do have a gin and tonic and a whiskey on the odd occasion. I only started drinking a few years ago.
I still enjoy a gin and tonic as an alternative to red wine.
Yeah, crisp and. But when you asked in the beginning about author and reader, what kind of answers were you looking for?
I don't think I was looking for anything. I just wanted to be encouraging that you stick with it, even though you're obviously in a world where there's intense competition. If your objective is to generate a successful product, or if your objective is to create a variation on the theme which might be purchased by one of the big guys. I just proves that one of my questions was how you are taking notes when you're having the Monday, Friday sessions. As I recall you saying you were recording, so that was the major source of note taking, transcribing. And somebody else was doing the same thing. I think it was Alan Laidlaw who was recording. I was taking hand scribbled notes, and I was kind of jealous and wondering if author might become a kind of note-taking capability at some point in time.
That's a discussion I would like to have over time. I just saw an Adobe video, I put it on our Twitter, where they have amazing means to analyze video, and then you can search keywords and all kinds of stuff. So that's one thing, but there is the eternal issue of manuscript versus published documents. So when you take notes, that's basically a manuscript. That's your own personal thing. So how that relates with other things. And I would like to just have, when I'm in a conversation like we are now, or the Monday, Friday talks, press a button when something's really pertinent. That's it. So that, maybe it goes back 30 seconds and it marks the next minute as this is something that I think is important. Because note-taking.
Yeah, the backward time jump is important because you don't realize it's significant until you're halfway through it.
Yeah, exactly. But then the question is, how much mental space do you want to take on doing the notes versus engaging in the conversation? And
absolutely.
Yeah. So there are many useful peripheral issues to this, but the tool that I developed first before Author was invented on a New Year's Eve. And I realized later I had completely ripped Doug off. which was really fun to realize. The origins of it was, it became, is what I called hyperwords. Now it's just called Liquid, where on a web browser, you select text, there's a little dot point to it, and you get a menu to do things with the text. That was quite fun, but then I did a Mac version of it where, and this was with a Chinese developer. I don't know why I had contact with them, very lucky, but I wanted to have something like that for every tool, every word processor, every writing, everywhere on the Mac. And he said, use services. So that's something hidden away in the context menu. So it means that you select any text that you want to do something with, keyboard shortcut, and then it takes that text and opens your application, Liquid, and inserts that text. That's all it does, the services. It's phenomenal because it means that you can do Wikipedia lookup, searches, translations, image lookup, all of that stuff within half a second without thinking. So it's become, you know, people really, really like it, but to market it is impossible because people have to see it before they understand it and to use it. So that was kind of a useful thing. But then a few years after Doug died, I decided I just have to put a stake in the ground and say, okay, fine, I must own my own word processor. Instead of just moaning about it, I have to decide what it should be. And of course, these two tools work together. I thought it would be easier to market a word processor because people know what it is, but they don't understand the difference between mine and others. That's really hard. So now I'm hoping that if I manage to pitch it right to do it for VR, meaning you probably work on your normal Mac, put your headset on, and suddenly have more options. Because using a keyboard is still fantastic. So I don't want to get rid of that. Right? But to do that, I'm hoping something will come through and that we're early enough in the days that the competition will be stiff, but if you do something unique, people can see it.
I was impressed when I saw the videos, the very concise, brief videos that were associated with the website where I found author. I've freely forgotten what it was I saw, but I was very impressed with the brevity of them and the substance per unit of time.
Thank you.
Did I also see something on Liquid in those? I've
really hidden it because it's too confusing. I'm just going to find a link for you now. So on the Augmented Text Company website, when you look, let me see, because way down it says work at the speed of thought, and then you get Liquid.
Okay.
I'm going to put that in the text chat now. Tell you what, do you want to talk again this week or next week? We might as well put something in the calendar, right?
I'd be glad to talk next week. Same time, Tuesday or?
Same time next week is brilliant. Yes. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. I'm just trying to move on the calendar here. Yeah, let's do that.
So I can now go chat and just get that link.
Yeah. Yes. So Tuesday.
Okay. So.
Okay, I put that in the calendar. And yes, I think for a while, the Monday, Friday chats may be a bit boring for you because it's going to be pushing.
I don't add much, obviously, but I was fascinated by him.
I wouldn't question about what you add. I mean, it's really random what we do in that group. It's like Peter was, he will often just spout out stuff that I just think is complete rubbish. And then it takes me 6 months to, oh, okay, that fits there. It's just really different people, and that's lovely. And of course, Bob being super angry sometimes is almost funny because he's such a nice guy. But there you go.
So why don't we'll talk next week on Tuesday at 9.
Yeah, look forward. I'm going to put this video up unlisted so we have a record of this. Is that cool?
That's okay.
Or should I just put it up?
Doesn't matter. I'm not even sure I know the difference.
Okay, fine. All right. See you later. Thanks for today.
Take
Have a
care.
lovely
Thanks.
long day.
Bye.
Bye.
And you.